In today's video, we have the latest trade talk around the NHL. Tonight, we're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as the Washington Capitals. We also have news from the IIHF. We have news from the NHL Board of Governor meetings. The Jets have a signing, and we have news from the waiver wire, as well as Victor Hedman playing a milestone game tonight. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. First up, I want to start by acknowledging that tonight is the milestone game number 1,000 for Lightning defenseman Victor Hedman. Of course, Hedman's had a tremendous career, played all 1,000 of those games with the Lightning, been a dominant defenseman. Obviously, the Lightning have a terrific video, but they put out through their social media, which I had seen here on Twitter just a short time ago, narrated by one of his best friends, Steven Stamkos, captain of the Lightning, kind of taking us through the career of Hedman and all he's accomplished. Terrific player. Seems like a great person off the ice, well liked, well respected. So congratulations to Victor Hedman for getting into an exclusive club of 1,000 games played. Like I said, dominant defenseman, individual accolades, Stanley Cup to his name. He's certainly having himself a career that's likely going to get himself into the Hall of Fame, or at least I would think he'd be, most likely get in, at least I would think at this point in time. So congratulations to him on that. News today from the NHL waiver wire. The Philadelphia Flyers today have placed defenseman Louis Belpedio on waivers. So we'll see tomorrow. He'll likely be reassigned, assuming he clears, which I would fully expect to happen. And the Winnipeg Jets today also early announced a signing. They've extended winger Neiderreiter. He's been a pretty good player for them since he was acquired, since he's ended up in Winnipeg. It's been a good fit for him. He's also, according to comments from the player, really likes living in Winnipeg. For a team in a city that occasionally has struggled to get people to want to commit there, this is a nice win for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets. Neiderreiter signs a 3-year extension at $4 million per season. The same value he's making now. He's $4 million on his current contract, which is set to expire at the end of the season. So essentially, he's going to be going for 3 more years at the same money. 14 points in 23 games. To me, for a top 6, top 9 winger who's versatile, decent defensive metrics, I think this is excellent value for the Jets to get him for a few more years at the same rate. He's in his early 30s, but still has lots left to give. Of course, he avoids being an unrestricted free agent this coming summer. So good signing there by the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, today, for the next couple of days, we have NHL Board of Governors meetings taking place, this time in Seattle. Nothing too major on the agenda, but there will be some, agenda items that we will expect some fairly important updates on. I don't expect anything earth-shattering to come from these meetings, but they are expected to be discussing the 2024 NHL Draft, which has not yet been confirmed and set as to the format, location, or any of that stuff. There's lots of speculation that they'd really like to have this draft in Vegas at the Sphere. Of course, we know moving forward in 2025, they're going to be changing the format of the draft. So this could be the last one of its kind, I guess you could say. If they prove too problematic to set up the things in the location and everything what they want to do, it could even take the new format into effect. It may do things differently, but that's certainly going to be an important topic for them. Of course, the salary cap and where things are heading for next year. I'm sure there'll be an update from Gary Bettman on the financial side of things and where things stand and what things are trending towards. It is widely expected. I know I heard Frank Saravalli and Elliot Friedman both make mention that they're bound to talk about expansion a bit more. There's certainly some cities that are, expected to be involved in the NHL sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. And considering the valuation increase we've seen, the average NHL franchise increase by 30% in the last number of years, it's a given. They're going to expand. There's pretty much no doubt, really. It's just a matter of how many and when it happens. May not be today, tomorrow, next year, but it's probably going to be within a couple of years. We'll likely see teams 33 and 34. I don't know if they'll come in together or they may be a little bit apart. Hard to say, but expansion will definitely be at least discussed to some extent with, expressions of interest from a variety of other cities that are, interested. And I'm sure they're likely going to be talking, based on reporters have said, that the future of the Coyotes. I know it's something that comes up pretty much at every Board of Governors meetings, and likely will until we have a clear-cut long-term plan. As of right now today, they still do not have a firm plan in place for a new arena. We don't know what's, your cutoff time. I mean, ultimately, it's believed that if their arena efforts did fail, it is possible, and I don't want to say with certainty because it's not a given, that they could be relocated for next season if they get to the point that all hope was lost. I believe, based on previous comments from Gary Bettman, I would think they said early in the new year, between I'd say by the All-Star game, by mid-February, I would suspect that if they don't have something in place, that's going to be kind of a ticking time bomb, that they're going to be looking, okay, we need to know pronto, or we don't want to drag this out another 5, 6, 7 years at the smaller ASU arena. I know they're doing fine at that arena, but there's a lot of other NHL owners and governors that are not happy about it because of the lack of revenue and everything that comes through. So certainly they don't want this to be dragging on too long. So I do suspect some sort of update in that regard. I've seen an update from Coyotes reporter Craig Morgan not long ago. I think it was probably within the past week. Didn't really bother including it in a video because there really wasn't a whole lot of an update, but it just said that essentially don't expect a big update from the Coyotes until there's something firm to talk about, and that they do have locations that they're looking at and they're optimistic. But again, we've been hearing that for so long, that until something is firm and they have a deal and it's going to happen for sure, you just can't say it with any kind of certainty. So we'll see if we get any, kind of clear updates that all come from these meetings. Another important update as well, this time not from the NHL, but from the IIHF, the International Ice Hockey Federation, has mandated neck guards or neck protection for all levels of competition now. They had previously looked at it and said they wanted it for the World Junior Championships and the U18 tournaments, and now it's at all levels. So that's going to include any men and women's level tournaments for the, older adults. So you're talking the World Championships, Olympics, anything that they're involved with, neck protection will be mandated. So of course, after the accident of Adam Johnson, we've seen a lot of different stances on this change, and more places kind of making it mandatory now. More players in the NHL are wearing it voluntarily at this point. It's not mandated currently. I know that's probably something else they will discuss at the Board of Governors meetings. I wouldn't be surprised if by next year it is mandated, but again, that's something that's going to have to be agreed upon by the players, and as much as it protects the players, there's been resistance in the past from those same players, so it's hard to imagine, but that's, it's not as simple as just saying that it has to happen, right? So it's something that's bargained in their contract. So we'll see how that works out. But internationally, they will be worn and they will have the protection, which is, in my opinion, a great thing. The Calgary Flames may be without starting goaltender Jacob Markstrom, and it could be for an extended time. It's hard to say. Apparently today in practice, he made a glove save. It was one that he got hurt on, though, and the glove save ended up sounding like he may have a broken finger. It's not for certain. They haven't announced that, but there was a lot of blood coming from the hand after he made the save. So we'll have to wait and see. He obviously left practice and was being dealt with from there. They did call up Dustin Wolf, so they're at least concerned on a short-term basis. But if he does have a finger in his catching hand that's broken or something to that nature, it could be at least a few weeks, maybe longer. Hard to say. For example, Mark Giordano of the Toronto Maple Leafs we knew he had a hand injury and was going to be out for a period of time. They confirmed today as well that Giordano does have a broken finger, and he's looking at about 4 to 6 weeks. So it could be a similar timeline for Markstrom if he indeed has a similar injury. So we'll have to see. I mean, that could be bad news for the Flames. Markstrom, obviously a big part of the team and plays a ton of games for them. So we'll see once we hear further updates on that. A couple of updates out of Washington. For one, we're going to get some pretty big news tonight as a healthy scratch has been made and for Evgeny Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov, of course, was benched for part of the last game against Vegas, and then he went from getting demoted to the fourth line and then benched completely for a stretch to end the game, and now he's a healthy scratch. As I mentioned before, this relationship was already fractured. There was talk in the last couple of off seasons that he wanted a trade, that he had requested a trade. They've never been able to figure one out. This probably won't help matters for that. Clearly, it appeared, though, based on some of the interviews he did in Russia and talked to different media outlets in the summer, that with the changes in Washington, between the roster changes, new coach, etc., that he seemed a little bit more likely and happier to kind of come back and give it a chance. Spencer Carberry's tried plenty to get him going and hasn't been happy with his performance, so he will sit tonight against the Arizona Coyotes. So we'll see what this means. I know there's been discussed as something on the Jeff Merrick show with Elliotte Friedman today, that when he talked again about, between what he talked about on the Merrick show this afternoon and the 32 Thoughts podcast that just came out this morning, they were talking again about Washington as well, saying how Washington has been another one of the teams that's been around Columbus a lot lately, and they have been kind of scouting them and looking at potential trades. We've heard from the GM, Brian McClellan himself, that he would love to add another top six forward. We do know as well that between Anthony Mantha and now Kuznetsov, they are players that they would love to move on from, but it's easier said than done. Mantha will be likely a little bit easier at some point if they can find a deal, because he is a pending UFA, so he's only got this year left on his deal. However, Evgeny Kuznetsov has this year and next year at $7.8 million. That's tough, and they would have to retain money. It'd be really tricky to do. I'm not really sure how they would go about that. Now, Columbus is a team that definitely needs help down the middle. I don't know if that's something they'd be willing to entertain. I'm not going to connect the two. I know Patrick Laine was a name that kind of was being toyed and wondered about if the Capitals were looking for a top six forward, and where Laine hasn't, had the greatest go in Columbus this year, if maybe it could be a case of swapping those two guys, struggling contracts, similar money, different age groups, mind you, but, would that be anything that they would look at? Columbus needs center. Kuznetsov is that. Would he be motivated with the trade? I don't know. That could be a risky move for both sides. It could work out for one, not the other. It could bomb on both sides. It's really difficult to say. But yeah, there's certainly some, thoughts going around with Kuznetsov and how can they find a way to move on. But it's going to be easier said than done. And, could we see a Kuznetsov-Laine swap? I don't know. I'm not so sure that Columbus wants to do that, but it'd be something to at least fun to think about, but hard to say if anything comes from it. Speaking of Tampa, there was also a lot of talk between Jeff Merrick and Elliotte Friedman around the future of the Lightning, considering that they're hovering around 500. They're not having a great season. Vasilevsky, since he's been returned to the lineup, has not been great. His first start was pretty decent. And then I think the last was I think he's played 4 or 5 games now. His numbers are atrocious. He was rocking like an 867 or 870 save percentage, which is well below average and well below what his standard is. Considered one of the top goalies in the world. I don't know if this is something that's going to get better over time. Typically, you don't want to, put too much stock into that because, obviously he's been out for an extended time. But they got embarrassed by the Dallas Stars the other night. I think it was 8-1. And Vasilevsky wouldn't come out of the game. I know John Cooper was a little frustrated because he was trying to pull Vasilevsky and Vasilevsky wouldn't come out. And we've seen that before. And he's made comments to it before, Cooper has, that if Vasilevsky doesn't want to come out, that he just won't. And because of the, long-standing record and accomplishments and the respect they have for him, that they don't really fight him too much on that. If he doesn't want to, they kind of just, don't try too hard and they let it be. But, interesting things going on in Tampa there with the lack of results so far. And there's just been Friedman and Merrick, they weren't really talking about, a major trade, but they just wondered what's going to happen if the results don't get better. And they're in a really tough Atlantic division. You've got teams like Boston, Florida, Detroit, Toronto, all performing better. You still got a team like Ottawa who could catch up to them real easy because they've got so many games in hand. They have to win those games, mind you, and if they don't play more consistent, they may not be an issue for Tampa, but still, there's enough teams there to give them a hard time that, finishing even higher than 4th or 5th might be a challenge if they don't make some improvements and get their act together. This is a team that's a veteran team, very well respected, very accomplished. Are they getting tired? hard to say. I mean, obviously they had a shorter season, a longer off season last year. A lot of people thought they could bounce back more this year, but they're just having a hard time, so it's hard to say where things go. But they were wondering about the future of Steven Stamkos, saying clearly Stamkos was quite upset that he didn't get his contract extension in the summer. The team basically refused to even talk about it, saying that they wouldn't even look at it till the end of the year. And if they're not going to talk about an extension and they get to the trade deadline and they are out of it, for example, or they're maybe in the mix for like a wild card at most, would that be a conversation they would have? Now, Friedman wasn't going to go as far as to say he thought they would do it. Clearly, Stamkos has all the control. If he doesn't want to go, he won't go. But with his level, I guess they were kind of pondering over him being frustrated with the lack of contract and everything, and knowing that there's uncertainty around it. Regardless, would he consider it? And then he could still re-sign in the summer if they could come to terms on a new deal. But you have to wonder how that's going to work out with them not having the season so far, at least, that they were hoping for. It's early, but it's also getting late in some respects as well. So we'll see where that goes. Stamkos is going to be one of the more interesting names to watch, given how the season goes. Of course, they discussed the Leafs a lot in the 32 Thoughts podcast as well, confirming again that Zadorov and Tanev were definitely a duo that Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs were trying to acquire from Calgary, and they just couldn't do it because they needed Calgary to retain the maximum amount of salary retention, and Vancouver did not. And the Calgary Flames were much more concerned with getting Zadorov done over Tanev, considering the trade request, and they just wanted to get that out of the locker room and be able to move on. So hence, Canucks made some moves and freed up the space, and they were able to take him on in full without retention, which was preferable. But he still expects the Flames to re-engage here with the Leafs. The Leafs are going to continue to pursue for Chris Tanev. The Flames, we've heard before, are trying to see here if they can trade some of these other guys with contract extensions to get better value in return. So we'll see. But the Leafs are going to need retention on Tanev as well. But they didn't want it. They couldn't. They also knew going into the season here that if they're going to trade some of these players like Zadorov, Tanev, Lindholm, etc., they can't retain salary on all of them, and they only have so many spots to retain on. So, Zadorov being a little bit lower on the totem pole here. So obviously, Tanev and Lindholm might be, a better return. They might be more willing to do that. So we'll see what happens, but expect the Leafs to continue pursuing Tanev. They don't have clarity on the future of John Klingberg just yet, but they should hopefully have that in the coming days here to be able to make it a decision. I know Merrick brought up the name of Sean Walker at Philly, and Friedman said, based on what he heard, he's not saying that the Leafs are not interested, but he's not high on their list, that they have other names that they have ranked higher that they would pursue first. But if all else fails, he could be, maybe option 3 or 4 or what have you, if other names that they have ranked higher on their list are not just able to get done. So we'll see. No doubt Brad Treliving wants to redo that blue line. Just a matter of how quickly he can get stuff done. A player like Tanev might be traded later in the season. Teams are going to need a little bit more time to accrue space and what have you, just to make the logistics of the cap work. So we'll see where that goes. And in Montreal, of course, we still know that there's the 3-headed goalie situation. We've heard a lot of different talking points in the last number of days since the Samuel Montembeault contract extension. Elliot Friedman made more talk about this on the latest podcast, saying that he's not really sure. He doesn't seem confident if it's going to be Allen or Primo, the more likely guy that goes. But he did say it feels like the 3 goalie system is coming to an end soon. It seems like the team and the head coach, Marty St. Louis, not really overly enjoying it. It's not great for the players. It's hard to get rhythm going. You can make an argument that are they going to give up on Caden Primo after a few years of development here, after he came out of college and been with them, in their pro system for a while, after like 5 games this year? I don't think so. He doesn't really have a huge sample of NHL games under his belt to say he's not going to cut it and give up. However, at the same time, they do have some other interesting goalie prospects that they've drafted in the past couple of years, which, even though they're not in their AHL system just yet, they will be in the next year or two, and they're going to have more options here. So do they ride things out with Jake and Montembeault and keep Allen in the fold for, between him and Montembeault in the next couple of years, and then hopefully move on to the next wave of younger goalies? Hopefully they develop into, being NHL ready? Or do they move Jake Allen and keep Primo, hoping that he can still become a regular guy behind Montembeault, and maybe they can make up the duo for the next few years while we're waiting on the next wave? It's difficult to say. You can make an argument that because they're rebuilding, it may not make sense to keep Jake Allen around, that it makes more sense to keep Primo. But at the same time, you can make the argument that maybe with Primo's small sample size and lack of success this year, they could sneak him through waivers, get him back to Laval, where he could actually continue developing and they can keep all three. So it's not a given that we see a goalie trade here, but Montreal is aware, which is why they've been reluctant to place him on waivers, that there are teams out there that like him and would likely snatch him given the opportunity. So we'll have to see how they proceed, but it's not really clear anymore, according to Friedman, who goes. But at least now, it does sound like there's a possibility that Primo might be the odd man out, and it might be through waivers. If all else fails, they might take a chance, but it's just so risky because they can't control it. There's no return, and if he gets picked up, and he's gone. It's just that simple. So it's something that they're quite reluctant to do. So let me know your thoughts on that. Who do they trade? And all the other news and discussed in today's video, we'll discuss that in the comment section. So if you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.